My husband took me to a party. Then some men did this, part 2. I never thought one night could change the way I saw my husband forever. It was supposed to be just a party, something casual, something fun. He told me to dress up, to trust him, that we'd have a good time. But the moment we stepped into that dimly lit room, something felt wrong. The air was thick, almost heavy, and the people inside, especially the group of men in the corner, they watched me like they knew something I didn't. Their stares weren't just curious, they were deliberate, calculated, like they had been waiting for me. At first, I brushed it off, tried to focus on my husband's smile, the music, the small talk. But even his touch felt different that night, distant, cold. And when he let go of my hand without saying a word, that's when I truly started to panic. One of the men offered me a drink. Another made a strange comment, almost like I was part of some unspoken plan. I kept asking my husband what was going on, but he just smiled, like this was all normal to him, like I was the only one who didn't get the joke. Then came the moment I'll never forget. A quiet confession, a deal, my name, tied to a promise he made long before we ever met. I was never supposed to know. But now I do. And suddenly, I'm not just his wife. I'm part of something much bigger, something I never agreed to. What exactly did he promise? And to who? My world started unraveling with every word he said. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, he placed something on the table that made every man in that room fall silent. Whatever this was, it's far from over. The object my husband placed on the table was small, metallic, and strangely worn, like it had been passed through many hands. The second it hit the glass, the room shifted. The men who had been confident and relaxed just moments ago now sat upright, their eyes glued to it. No one spoke for a long time. I stared at it too, not even knowing what I was looking at, but I knew it mattered. Whatever it was, it changed something. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned to look at my husband, but his expression didn't tell me anything. He looked tired. Not scared, not regretful, just tired. Like he'd been carrying the weight of this moment for far too long. The silence stretched between all of us, heavy with unspoken meaning. Then one of the men reached out slowly and picked it up. He studied it carefully, then glanced at my husband with a quiet smirk. "This?" he said. "You've had this all along?" My husband nodded once. The man leaned back in his seat, turning the object over in his hand. "You should have led with this. It would have saved a lot of time." I wanted to scream. I didn't understand what any of it meant, but I could feel it in my gut. Whatever deal my husband had made, whatever this thing was, it wasn't normal. It wasn't something most people ever got close to. And now I was in the middle of it. The man passed the object to the one next to him, and suddenly the group was murmuring again. Quick, quiet words I couldn't catch. Every now and then, they'd glance at me like I was still the key piece to all of this. I leaned closer to my husband, whispering through clenched teeth, "What is that? What did you give them?" He looked at me, his eyes tired and quiet. "Something they've wanted for a long time. Something I shouldn't have taken." That didn't help. It only made things worse. What kind of thing could make a room full of powerful-looking men fall silent? Why was I involved in any of this? The man holding the object finally spoke again, voice calm but firm. "This buys you time, but it doesn't erase the promise. That's still on her." On me. The words echoed in my head, and the fear I'd been trying to push down came rushing back. I wasn't free, not yet. I sat frozen in my seat, trying to make sense of the man's words. "That's still on her." My mind replayed it again and again. What promise? Why me? I was just a wife brought along to a party, dressed up, smiling, trying to act like everything in our marriage was fine. And now suddenly I was the center of some strange deal, something old, secret, and clearly dangerous. The man who said it stood up slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his jacket. His eyes met mine for just a second. Cold, calculating, like I was a piece of a puzzle he'd already figured out, and he was just waiting for it to fall into place. He didn't say anything else before leaving the room, but I noticed how the others straightened when he did. He had power, and not the kind that came from money. It was deeper than that. When he was gone, the tension didn't lift. In fact, it got worse. One of the other men finally turned to me. His voice was quieter, almost softer. "Do you know what he gave us?" I shook my head. He looked at my husband, who still hadn't spoken again, then back to me. "It's not just an object, it's a marker, a debt that connects to blood. Someone made a vow long ago, and you're part of it, whether you realize it or not." I felt sick. I whispered, "Is this about your family?" My husband didn't answer right away. His hands were clenched on his knees. Finally, he nodded. "My grandfather. He promised something when times were hard. Something no one ever thought would come due. I didn't believe it. I thought, if I found the marker and returned it, it would be over." "But it's not," I said, my voice shaking. "It's on me now." He looked at me, eyes full of guilt. "I never meant for that to happen. I didn't know it would pass through the bloodline the way it did." Suddenly, another man in the room spoke up, this one younger and more intense. "You're both pretending this is about old debts, but you haven't told her the truth." "What truth?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The young man stood, walking toward me slowly. "You're not just connected to the promise, you are the reason it was made." Everything inside me went still. What did he mean by that? My breath caught in my throat. The room, already heavy with tension, now felt suffocating. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, louder than the murmurs of the men who were now watching me like I was something rare, dangerous even. I glanced at my husband, waiting for him to jump in, to say it was all some misunderstanding, but he didn't. He just sat there, looking away, like the truth had finally become too heavy to hide. "What do you mean? I am the reason?" I asked the younger man, my voice barely holding together. He stepped closer, his gaze intense, but not cruel. "Your birth wasn't an accident. Neither was your marriage. This wasn't just fate. It was arranged, carefully, silently, from the moment you were born." I shook my head. "Number? My family doesn't even know these people. We're ordinary. My parents worked normal jobs. They never even talked about anything like this." The man nodded slowly. "Because they didn't know. But your bloodline, it's tied to the woman the promise was originally made to, your great-grandmother. She was part of the original pact." My knees felt weak. I reached for the edge of the table to steady myself. "That's impossible." My husband finally spoke. "I tried to keep you out of it. That's why I brought you tonight. I thought maybe if they saw you, if they understood you had no idea, they'd let it go." "Let what go?" I snapped, suddenly angry. "What exactly did your grandfather promise?" The younger man looked at my husband, then back at me. "It wasn't money or land. It was loyalty, a soul-bound connection. And when that woman died before fulfilling the pact, your family carried the debt unknowingly." I could barely breathe. "So what do they want now? From me?" There was a silence in the room that made my skin crawl. Finally, the younger man said, "To finish the promise, you have to make a choice, and they're not leaving until you do." I glanced around the room. These men weren't just guests. They were waiting for something, watching me. Like I was some final piece in a long game none of us truly understood. I didn't know what the choice was, but deep down I could feel it wasn't something I could take back. My throat was dry, my mind spinning with everything I'd just heard. A soul-bound connection? A pact made generations ago? None of it made sense. And yet, standing in that room, surrounded by eyes that seemed to know more about me than I did myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very real about it all. What happens if I don't make the choice? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. The younger man glanced at the others, then back to me. Then they choose for you. And when they do, you won't get to walk away the same. My husband stepped forward, finally breaking the silence between us. I didn't think it would come to this, he said softly, guilt all over his face. I thought marrying you would be enough, that if the family saw you had a normal life, they'd leave it in the past. But I underestimated how far they'd go to collect what they believe is owed. His words were like daggers. You knew? I whispered. All this time, you knew something like this could happen? I knew something was bound to surface, he admitted. But not like this, not this soon. Just then, the older man, the one with the silver hair and commanding presence, finally stood. She deserves the truth, he said, his voice calm but cold. Not just about the pact, about why she was chosen. My eyes narrowed. Wasn't it because of my great-grandmother? He shook his head. That's only part of it. There was another reason, one that even your husband doesn't know. The room went quiet. I could hear the music still playing faintly from another part of the house, so out of place compared to the heaviness in the air. I held my breath. You weren't just chosen because of your bloodline, he continued. You were chosen because of what you carry. You're not just a descendant, you're the final key. My stomach twisted. Key? To what? He stepped closer, his eyes studying me like I was a riddle he'd waited years to solve. To something that's been locked away for nearly a century. Something your great-grandmother tried to protect when she broke the pact and vanished. I took a step back. I don't understand. How can I be a key to something I don't even know exists? The younger man looked at me then, something almost like fear behind his eyes. Because it's not about what you know, it's about what's inside you. And if they unlock it without your consent, it could destroy everything. The air in the room suddenly shifted, like a storm was coming. I could feel it in my chest, a tightening I couldn't explain. My skin prickled, and then, without warning, the lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the room, even though all the windows were shut. Something ancient was waking up, something tied to me. And for the first time, I realized I might not be just a part of this story. I might be the center of it. The tension in the room was unbearable, as if we were all holding our breath, waiting for something to snap. My mind raced, trying to piece together the truth, the key, the ancient power locked away. But what did it all mean? What was inside me, and how could I stop it from being unleashed? The older man took a slow step toward me, his voice low and deliberate. The ritual must be completed, but only with your permission, he said. You have the power to end it, to decide what happens next. End it? I repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. How am I supposed to end it? I don't even understand what's happening. The younger man stepped in, his gaze full of pity. What you carry inside you isn't just a gift, it's a curse, one that's been passed down through generations. The silver-haired man nodded. Your great-grandmother tried to break the cycle. She thought she could protect you, but what she did only delayed it. Now, the bloodline has come full circle, and you are the final link. I took a step back, my heart pounding. I had always felt different, but this was something else entirely, something deeper, more sinister. Suddenly, everything went dark. The room fell silent, and I could feel the cold air around me thickening, pressing in like an invisible weight. The power, the one they were talking about, was rising. I felt it. It was inside me, a force I could no longer ignore. The whispers of a forgotten past echoed in my mind, voices that weren't my own, memories of things I had never lived. The ancient power was awake, and it was hungry. And then, just as the air felt suffocating, the lights came back on. But something was different. The room seemed colder, the shadows longer. I could sense a presence behind me, a weight in the air. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there, except for my husband, who stood motionless, staring at me. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something I couldn't read. "The truth," he whispered, his voice shaky, "was never what I thought it was." Before I could respond, the silver-haired man spoke again, his words heavy with finality. "It's too late. The cycle cannot be stopped now. The key has unlocked the door, and you're bound to it." But just as I thought the worst was upon us, a sudden crash interrupted the moment. The walls trembled, and the floor seemed to shake beneath us. I turned, heart racing, and saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure appeared in the doorway, a woman dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her eyes glowing with an eerie light. It was my great-grandmother, and she wasn't here to save me. She was here to take what was owed. My heart skipped a beat as I locked eyes with the figure in the doorway. It was her, my great-grandmother, or rather what was left of her. Her once warm, vibrant eyes were now nothing more than cold, glowing orbs of some unknown power. She stepped forward, her movements slow but deliberate, as if the air itself obeyed her command. The room grew even colder, and I felt the weight of the past settle over me like a blanket of fear. But there was no time for fear now. I had to make a choice. I had no more room for confusion or hesitation. My whole life, I had been running from this, trying to ignore the power within me, hoping it would disappear. But it hadn't. It was real, and it was time for me to face it. "You don't belong here," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling but determined. "You had your chance, and now I choose my own path." She laughed softly, the sound echoing in the room like a distant memory. "You think you have a choice?" Her voice was both familiar and foreign, like a ghost speaking through a veil. "The power inside you is not yours to command. It was never yours to control." Before I could respond, the silver-haired man stepped forward, raising a hand as if to stop her. "Enough, Eloise. It's not too late. We can still end this." But my great-grandmother's laugh grew louder, more mocking. "End it? There is no end. There's only the beginning of the cycle." I closed my eyes for a moment, a surge of emotion flooding me, anger, fear, regret. But there was something else, too. Clarity. The key was in me, not in her, not in anyone else. It was mine. I had to make the final decision. With a deep breath, I took a step forward, closer to the source of the power. The room seemed to pulse around me, and for the first time, I felt its presence, its rhythm. I wasn't just a vessel for it anymore. I was its equal. With one final decisive thought, I reached out, touching the air in front of me. The power surged through me, like a wave crashing against the shore. My great-grandmother let out a cry, but it was too late. The force I held now was greater than anything she had ever known. As the room erupted in light, everything went silent. When I opened my eyes again, the world was different. My husband was standing beside me, his hand gripping mine. The shadows had lifted, and the coldness had faded. The power was no longer a curse. It was a part of me, but now I controlled it. I chose my future, not the ghosts of the past. And as for my great grandmother, I could still feel her presence, but now it was just a whisper in the wind. The cycle was broken, and I was free.